This is Prime Sports Hockey on Prime Sports Network. That's right. Hockey is back. The playoffs will be beginning in about a couple of weeks, give or take. Playing round comes first, Jan, and then we get into the hockey edition of the Stanley Cup playoffs for 2020, which is going to be quite interesting, but it's better than no hockey.
I think it's going to be more than interesting. I think it's going to be rather intriguing with, technically, if you view it based upon the way they're treating these stats, right? You have 24 teams technically in the playoffs, right? Top four.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, I don't. We're both out. Our teams are both play-in. If Vancouver can't beat Minnesota to get into the round of 16, I don't count that as a playoff year.
I agree with you. I can understand the view. I mean, I think what the NHL tried to do was what teams had a realistic shot of getting into the playoffs if the season had not been cut short due to the pandemic. People felt that they really wanted Montreal to get in because of the ratings and because of Carey Price, but they tried to balance it as best as they could, figuring those who had for the most part, a realistic shot of getting into the playoffs, and then taking the top four in each, giving them a quote unquote bye. There is a round robin tournament amongst them that does have an impact in terms of seeding. One key to remember this year is, in the past couple of years, everything's been bracketed and everything's been within your own division originally. You can forget that idea for right now. No bracketing. Whichever the highest seed will play the lowest seed in each round is how it's going to work. No more putting you in a 14 bracket. No more putting you in a divisional bracket. So if the number 11 team advances, they're going to play the top seed. And if they continue to advance into the highest number seed to keep moving forward, they're going to play the best team every single round until you get to the Eastern or Western Conference Finals, and then clearly in the Cup. So
that's okay. Nothing wrong with that.
No opt-outs. No opt-outs so far. There are a couple of people who there are concerns about. We'll go into it. Max Domi's one, who has type 1 diabetes. Capo Caco's another one who has type 1 diabetes and celiac. Both of them had the option of opting out, but so far nobody has opted out. So, and there's nobody who right now is missing the tournament, though. We'll get into a little bit in terms of the impact on the Blackhawks when we go through that preview.
Not surprising, though. These are hockey players. They're tough, man.
No, but again, as we've seen, there are football players who are already starting to opt out also. Even before the season starts.
Yeah, well, football players.
If you have a family member who's at risk, right, or you yourself are at risk.
Yeah, right.
You can
okay.
Potentially
I'm sure that's why Tardif decided to opt out, because he had family members. He decided to opt out because he's already a millionaire. He doesn't need the money. Well, and hockey players don't make that much money. Right. And they're tougher. And by the way, they're tougher than football players.
Okay. But this is also an end of a season, not a beginning of a season. So
absolutely.
The amount of money they're getting also. So
they have been, they've played their regular season. They want to pay off.
So the other piece of the puzzle since we've last spoken that's very critical is there's labor peace now for the next 6 years.
What does that mean?
Meaning that, so the CBA expired in about another 2 years. There were strong rumors that after the collective bargaining agreement expired, there was likely going to be a lockout or a strike based upon some of the division between the NHL and the NHLPA. During the time frame where they came up with the entire bubble strategy, both sides have been meeting consistently to find an accord moving forward. So the agreement, in essence, extends the current CBA for another 4 years. So in essence, you have a 6-year labor peace. With that will come probably the Olympics in 2022 and 2026. Which is something that was a key component, especially for the players. The one downside is because of the impact associated with the pandemic and the lack of revenue, we will have a flat cap for the next 2 years of $81.5 million.
And who does that? And how do we know whether how that hurts or helps? It's the specific teams.
If you have a team that has a lot of free agents or a lot of money that's tied up for a small number of people, you're going to have a hard time augmenting your roster because you're not going to have a lot of cap room to go out into the marketplace. And what the expectation is from a lot of colleagues of mine in the industry is you're going to have even more of a class system. You're going to have the top tier who's still going to get paid. You're going to have the bottom tier that's going to get the lower level. Those guys in the middle who normally get the $4 or $5 million contracts, those are the ones that may get squeezed in terms of what kind of salary they may expect moving forward. And also, you're going to have an impact in terms of the length of a contract compared to what you might have had in years past.
And where does somebody like a Tyler Toffoli fit in?
He's right in that middle class. I mean, I don't consider him a $7 or $8 million elite player, but he's clearly also not a bottom guy now. And
so the odds are better that he stays with Vancouver under this scenario, as long as they're going to pay him.
Depends on what Vancouver's cap availability is.
Yeah, as long as they have the money, a decent amount of money. But if this was the system before, and there was an opportunity for Toffoli to make more money elsewhere, that's why this might benefit Vancouver and make it easier for them to sign him.
Potential.
Okay.
Right? They still have the issue because if other teams have more money and he wants to go that route, that's still.
Well, I mean, like but that's what I'm asking, because under the same, I mean, under the scenario before,
to a certain extent, but if you're a team right now that has a lot of players that are tied up and have minimal cap room, you now need to figure out how to create additional room either through buyout, or that's really your only option right now, to buy a guy out to try to free up a little cap room. If Vancouver has the sufficient amount of room to bring Toffoli in and he's happy there, it's feasible you might get a haircut in terms of the cap hit compared to what you might have had to pay in years past if a guy really wants to stay there.
All right. Well, then on the flip side, from the player's point of view, does this help them or hurt them? The average player.
It hurts the average player because the fact that
then it helps the team. So it does help a team then
in the future.
So it helps the team that has the average player. It makes it easier for them to sign him.
Potentially, yes. So we were looking at a $3 million increase at one point in time. Now you're looking at a flat cap, so that $3 million is no longer going to be available to spend on those players.
Okay. And that's for 2 years.
For next 2 years, and then it's a $1 million increase the year after.
Oh, big! Wow, $1 million.
I mean, look. Well, if you think about it, right, Greg? If you don't have the revenue and you don't have the money to be able to bring into the coffers to a certain extent, now the other piece of the puzzles. Remember, Seattle is we now have a 32nd team with a name. The Seattle Kraken is their name. They have to pay their installments for their expansion fee. All that money is not what's considered hockey-related revenue. All that money goes into the owners' pockets, and the players don't see a dime of it.
And that starts next year.
Next year, yep.
So when this season's over, and by the way, when is the Stanley Cup Finals? If there's no delay,
I believe the last potential date is October 8th, and you're looking at right thereafter the draft, and shortly thereafter.
What's thereafter?
A couple days.
Okay, so a draft comes like the very next week.
Yep.
And then what's after that?
And then free agency.
The very next week.
And then right now we're looking at, I think, games potentially starting December 1st, which surprised me in terms of that short of a break.
So it's only like 2 or 3 weeks later than normal.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, if you think
so far.
Yeah. I mean, I really thought we were going to go. Well, it's probably about 6-7 weeks later. Usually, it's
same schedule.
We're now looking at December 1 for starting games. I really thought we were going to start January 1 with the Winter Classic. So that quick of a turnaround surprises me.
Same schedule.
82 games.
Okay. All right. And yeah, the thing that we will continue to talk about here, and I still think there's the possibility of change, but it's a short window. You're only talking about, let's see, well, you're talking August, then September. So it's a little bit more than 2 months. It'll be interesting to see how it works out, whether or not, if the closer we get to the Stanley Cup Finals, whether or not they'll start allowing a certain percentage of fans in the stadium. I guess that all depends on how things are going. I look, there's going to be a huge asterisk, no doubt. I think there's a bigger asterisk in baseball. See, baseball to me it's like a gimmick season, no question. Okay.
I don't think you're getting an asterisk there, Greg. I really don't, because if you think about it, go back to
but there's no home ice.
But remember, post strikes and locks out, you had 48 and 54 game seasons.
But you had home
Nobody
ice.
The Devils, when they won the title in 94-95, talks about it's a shortened season.
And I agree, but there was home ice.
Yeah, but also there's an additional quote unquote round now,
and there's no
so
fans.
If the team goes all the way through, you're playing potentially 5 more games than you would have in the past.
Well, I'm not saying it's easier. I mean, the easier or harder thing isn't. It's just I don't care about that. It's just that look, and who knows? I think it also depends on who wins it. I think if you get your typical Pittsburgh win, one of those, a team who's already won it, that's different. Now, if St. Louis, who won last year, had all of a sudden found a way to win it this year, I'm telling you, people would say, oh, yeah, but St. Louis, they never won it. They only won it because of the pandemic. So I think it's going to depend on who wins it more than anything.
This way, Greg, if your Vancouver Canucks find a way
I don't
to win
want, I'm being completely honest with you. I don't want to win it. If they win it, I'm going to be happy. I'll watch it. But, asking me realistically, is it something that I'm like, hey, man, I'm going to watching these games like I would have if this was the real Stanley Cup Finals? No. And I'm not going to be able to get into it with no fans. I'm just not. Now the baseball thing was different because it's first games of the season. It's different. I get it. They're already in hockey. It's going to be ramped up. Every game means something kind of deal. And your silly camera keeps moving. So let me see. Okay, so in that respect, that's the thing that's going to kind of bother me. And I look, we'll talk next week. And when we talk next week, hold on a second, because your thing keeps now getting bigger and smaller. When we talk next week, we'll have a better understanding after we watch these games, how it feels, how it sounds. Now, is there any talk of them doing anything ridiculous that we saw in baseball this past weekend?
Define ridiculous.
Cardboard cutouts. Thank
no.
God.
The only thing you might get, and I haven't seen confirmation of this, but I have a feeling it will happen. You might see players from other teams in the stands watching the games.
That's fine. That's the more people in the stands, the better.
Other than that, I mean, you're going to get some screen. You're going to have screens up, like they're doing, I think, for basketball. But I don't. But again, I haven't heard anything, and I don't have a problem with the cardboard cutouts. So we disagree on that one. I haven't heard anything that the NHL plans on doing anything in terms of stuff like that with cardboard cutouts. I mean, I think the big difference you may get some different camera angles, because of the lack of fans and some of the other amenities they may have in the arena.
Well, they're not going to pipe in noise, are they?
Differently. I haven't heard anything. It's a feasibility on piped in noise, but I don't think it's been finalized yet as to whether or not they're going to go that direction.
I certainly hope not. So that's what we'll see. I'd rather have the cardboard cutouts than the piped in noise. I just think it's it's made. First of all, I think it's made to let us accept it. And I don't want to accept this. And I don't want them thinking I'm accepting this. So no, I am not accepting cardboard cutouts. Screw you. I'm not accepting piped in noise. Screw you. Get the fans. Because especially now, I understand more the hockey indoor stadium situation a little bit more than the outdoor stadium deal. But I still think there's a way where you can put in 5,000 fans into a stadium and spread them out and make sure they all come in and social distance, mask, and all that. I still think there's a way to do that. That's why I'm not going to accept whatever that they're trying to do to make us accept it. But we'll find out next week. It'll be interesting, especially the lack of a crowd and what exactly we're going to hear on the ice.
Well, we'll go through that a little bit. You are having a 5-second delay because of the potential of blue language on the ice with things being on broadcast. And in terms of fans, the only thing they've talked about is maybe for the conference finals or Stanley Cup Finals, that maybe the families, the skaters will be able to have their families join them in the bubble. That's been about the only thing that's been talked about definitively. Clearly, it's going to depend on where we are in about another month and whether or not numbers are spiking, especially in in Edmonton or Toronto, where the conference finals are going to be, in Edmonton, where the Cup Finals are slated to be held.
See, and I look at sports. To me, there is no sports without fans. And when you don't and can't celebrate a championship without fans, that's part of the reason why I think this is not going to be as acceptable as a normal playoff format. I just, and then I think it's going to be quite hilarious to see the teams who wins the Stanley Cup skating around the ice with the cup to 15 fans. I think it's going to look.
We'll see where we are.
I hope that's not the case. I hope that by the finals, they'll be able to put in several thousand fans to make it look halfway normal. So, but we'll start next week. And then, hey, I'm glad they do have a delay, because that means that we are going to be allowed to pick up just about everything else on the ice. And I think that will be one thing that I'd rather hear than piped in phony crowd noise. Wouldn't you?
Okay.
Don't you want to hear what's going on the ice?
I look.
Or do you want to hear?
I think you're going to have you're going to have goal calls potentially from teams, like usual.
What do you mean goal calls?
If a team scores, so I think that may be quote unquote piped in noise. But other than that, I don't think you're necessarily going to have cheering, because
what kind of goal noise? What kind of piped in goal noise?
Like like maybe the arena goal sounds, right?
You mean like a siren? That's okay.
Yeah,
sirens are right.
Or the theme song. Each team sometimes.
I'm okay
has
with that too.
The Rangers
I'm all
have
right
the goal
with that.
song.
I'm okay with that. Each team has their own theme song, goal score. I got no problem with that. I just don't want that. What I heard with the Nationals Yankee broadcast on Saturday, because I couldn't. I really seriously. I mean, because I know that's going to continue for some time, but I just rather have the mute button on. It annoys me just hearing phony. It's like they're trying to mislead me with these oohs and ahs. It's just, I don't want to deal with it, but we'll see.
Trying to make it a bit more realistic compared to just kind of a intra-squad game with nobody in the stands.
What's that?
They're trying to make it.
I know what they're trying to
more
do.
realistic.
I know what they're trying to do.
Intra-squad game with nobody in the stands.
I know, but that's like I said.
There's no perfect solution.
The more
here, Greg.
the more they make it real,
trying to find it.
The more it's real, like I said, the more we won't accept it. I don't want to accept it. So I want people to be, no, I don't like this. I don't like that.
Well,
let's get back to.
I don't think this is the long-term plan.
I agree, and I just and the good thing is this will be over real fast. So, and then hopefully, see, I just so you now here's the thing: is there a lot of hope, or is the goal realistic that when the 2021 season begins in what is it, December, that everything's back to normal?
There's a hope. Clearly, as we've seen, though, that a lot of it may be vaccine dependent. So it all depends on how they kind of handle the beginning. The beginning of the season might be different than how we go midway.
You mean like saying, okay, we'll let a certain portion of fans in at each stadium, that kind of thing?
Potentially, yes. Not that all that is still very much up in the air, and it's all dependent on where we stand in terms of what's going on in terms of the pandemic within both countries.
All right, now the teams that are not playing, we have our Stanley Cup odds. You can see them online because there are obviously teams that are not going to be participating in the play-in. That let's see, I've got money on Tampa, Colorado, Boston, and Philly, and Vegas, and Washington. Yeah, I think those are the teams that are not. And Dallas. So those are the teams that are playing. We're not playing in the play-in round. You have Boston, Tampa Bay, St. Louis. You have Vegas. You have Washington. I'm not sure if I said that already. And that's it. Everybody. Wait, yeah, I think that's it. Dallas.
I thought I had Colorado too, but
let's see. Colorado. No.
Maybe not.
Colorado yet. Okay. But we'll get back to futures once the play-in round is over, and then this will give us at least a little bit of an understanding of how this craziness is going to go. All right, let's talk about it. We'll start with Pittsburgh and Montreal. Pittsburgh's 12-1 to win the Cup. Montreal is 66-1 to win the Cup, and that's because it's still, you got Crosby, you got Malkin, the big addition at the deadline for Pittsburgh, Zucker. And then of course getting Gensel back from the shoulder injury is huge. So they're just much more potent, skilled, championship pedigree team. Where Montreal, it's all about Carey Price, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you go by what the rumors were, right, a lot of people were supposedly, at least in the NHL, were set with the 24 teams because they were putting Montreal in. There was a lot of rumors as to, well, it needed to be a best of 5, not a best of 3. Because they didn't want the goalie to potentially have that big an advantage or that much of a shot.
Oh, I agree on that completely.
What's that?
I agree on that completely. I don't think that it made any, unless you were going to play the bottom 8 and let them go at each other in a best of 3, that's different. But that would not be fair to a team like Pittsburgh and Montreal against Montreal.
I agree. So, I mean, I still remember way back when there was a best of 3 in the NHL, back in the late 70s and the early 80s. But Pittsburgh, like you said, Crosby is supposedly back to full health. He missed some time with illness. Malkin, as you talked about, adding Zucker, Jason Zucker, getting Gensel back from his shoulder injury. They didn't expect to have him back originally, so the delay clearly benefits them. We see what Brian Rust and Connor Sheary were doing. Montreal's got decent. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, Domi has the health woes, but he's still slated to play. Nick Suzuki really came on in the second half. The top line of Tatar, Gallagher, and Deneau is pretty solid. And Deneau was one of those guys who potentially could have gotten Selke consideration based upon how good he was defensively. So that helps them. Defensively, Montreal still has Weber and Jeff Petrie. But beyond that, there's a pretty much substantive drop-off, right? So even if the top line, quote-unquote, gets shut down a little bit by Weber and Petrie, that second line of Pittsburgh should potentially have a field day against Montreal's second and third pairing of defense. And then, Pittsburgh is all around Chris Letang, but Marcus Pettersson's been pretty solid. Justin Schultz and John Marino make a decent top 4. And then in goal, I mean, we've seen Carey Price has shown signs of slippage the last couple of years. He's turned back the clock, once or twice in the past couple of years, but compared to what we saw in years past, it wasn't the Carey Price of old. Mm-hmm. I mean, Pittsburgh has a material decision that Mike Sullivan has to make. Does he go with Matt Murray, who has 2 cups? Or does he go with Tristan Jarry, who's outplayed Murray at times during the year? My gut call says he's going to go with Murray, at least to start with, knowing that he's got Jarry in his hip pocket if he needs it. But I think that Matt Murray is going to be the guy who gets the tap on the shoulder for Game 1 against Montreal.
Okay, if Pittsburgh goes ahead and beats Montreal, and let's just say there's only a couple of mild upsets, where, just so I get an example, give me a team that Pittsburgh more than likely, give me a team or two that Pittsburgh would more than likely play to start the playoffs.
Well, so the round robin will decide to a certain extent, and I'm not in full agreement with this, but the round robin will decide who gets the 1 through 4 seeds, right? So
what does that mean?
Pittsburgh will play if Pittsburgh wins, they will play the number 4 seed.
No matter what.
No matter what.
Okay, so we'll already know that if Pittsburgh wins, they're going to play who?
We don't know yet. It depends on who.
How do we not know the 4 seed?
Whoever the 4 seed is.
Wait. I thought we already.
Could be Tampa, could be Washington, could be Philly.
And why don't we know who that is?
The round robin is done.
So why don't we know who that is?
Because the round robin hasn't taken place yet.
We don't have 4 teams in each conference?
The round robin tournament, quote unquote, is taking place the same time where the play-in round is. My view on this should have been, and this, again, it wasn't what the NHL followed. My view is Boston was so far ahead of the other 3 teams that even if the other 3 teams beat Boston, that Boston still would have more points than them. That is not how they're necessarily doing it. The round robin does have an impact in terms of who is the 1, 2, 3, and 4 seed in terms of coming out of each division.
Okay, so the 8 teams, the 8, right?
Yep.
Okay, the 8 teams in the round robin, they are playing each other during the same time that the play-in round is going on.
Correct.
And this is just for positioning.
Correct.
Okay. Now, television coverage-wise, are we going to wind up seeing more of the play-in games than the round robins?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yep.
All right, because I was looking at some of the scheduling just for the first games, Saturday and Sunday, and I believe I saw that every game was televised. Right? Every game was televised?
They are starting at 12 noon on the East Coast, and basically if you are a hockey junkie, you can pretty much watch close to 14 hours straight of hockey.
Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, good.
And wait, the one thing I will add also in that will, it's interesting for this year is we normally, I don't think we've had in many, many years, teams playing on back-to-back days. That is now not the case. Every team, I believe, at least once will have a back-to-back during the play-in round.
Just the play-in round.
As of now, the remainder of the schedule hasn't formally come out yet.
That's good.
But remember, everybody is
not the playoffs.
Location.
That's okay.
Right? It's not like you have to travel.
Yeah, exactly.
From location to location at all.
And it's not the playoffs. So just get out there and position yourself, and everybody has the same situation. So I'm okay with that. All right. Gonna have to make sure you use a different computer next time. Maybe that's the problem. Not sure.
I'm not moving and it's not
Nah,
moving. I
it's
haven't
just
touched anything.
sometimes it's just the connection. Sometimes one
Yep.
connection doesn't connect with the other connection. It probably wouldn't work out too well on a blind date. All right, Carolina and the Rangers. Your Rangers, 33-1 to win the Cup. Carolina, 45-1 to win the Cup. Of course, Carolina made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals last year, and so they're a very dangerous team. And but the Rangers, again, odds wise, they would be the pick in this series. So how confident are you that your Rangers will get past the Carolina Hurricanes, even though the Rangers are the 11th seed and the Hurricanes are the 6th seed?
Confident, yes. Cocky, no. I take the 4-0. Look, here's what I said a lot of times. Take whatever the records were a lot of times the first 5+ months of the season, and to a certain extent, you can kind of toss them in the garbage and use them as liner for your birdcage because no team has played since about March 12th or so, right? So we're looking at close to 5 months where there's no games. The Rangers and Hurricanes, the Rangers beat Carolina 4-0 in terms of the season series. The last game was 6 months ago. Teams are very different right now.
Uh-huh.
Look, I mean, Carolina, no, Dougie Hamilton was supposedly going to come back from his broken fibula. All seemed right with the world. Something happened last week in practice. Now he's basically going to be out a couple of weeks. No one knows how long a length of a time that's going to be. He's now out. Brett Pesce is definitely going to be out for the playoffs. But they acquired Sammy Vatanen from the Devils before the deadline, and he's going to be back from his injury. That helps them in terms of depth, where they already had a very solid blue line that gets bolstered with Sammy Vatanen, and you have a nice little twist to it because the Rangers at the deadline dealt Brady Shea to Carolina for a first-round pick. So that gives them a little added juice in terms of the series. The advantage that Carolina really had over the Rangers, at least a substantive edge, was on their blue line, especially if they were going to get Doug Hamilton back. They do have Jakob Slavin, who stepped up substantially when Hamilton's been out. They have good depth with guys like Trevor Van Riemsdyk and Joel Edmondson. You have Slavin, as I said. You have Vatanen. You have Shea. The Rangers, you're going to see a lot of Adam Fox and Ryan Lindgren, who are probably their number one pairing. You're going to see Brendan Smith, who moved from forward back to defense when Shea was traded with Trouba. And you're going to see Tony DeAngelo skating with Mark Stahl. Up front, you have Chris Kreider, who had a broken foot, who was likely going to miss the start of the playoffs, but because of the pandemic delay, he's back. Who gets to skate with Mika Zibanejad, who was absolutely on fire when play stopped, and Pavel Buchnevich. Rangers' big signing, as you know, is Artemi Panarin, who ended up being a Hart Trophy and a Ted Lindsay Award finalist, who's skating on a line with Ryan Strome and with Jesper Fast. As I mentioned, Capo Caco is dealing with diabetes, with type 1 diabetes and celiac. He's going to suit up, and that gives them a solid second line along with Philip Hedl. But Carolina has the Tero Teravainen, Sebastian Aho, and Andrei Svechnikov trio, who is their main line. And you know, and I both discussed the last several years, Justin Williams has been a playoff monster, especially in Game 7s in years past. He's been the guy you look at. That's the guy who's going to lead them, that helped Carolina reach the Eastern Conference Finals last year. The big story is in net. Heinrich Lundqvist has a historical record that's been monstrous versus Carolina, but he's likely going to see time, at least from what we expect, Igor Shesterkin, who's been called the heir apparent to Lundqvist in net, while Carolina has Peter Mrazek, who carried them to the Eastern Conference Finals, backed up by James Reimer. So there's a lot of subplots, a lot of stories. Am I confident they can win? Yes. But I also know that Carolina is no pushover. They're playoff tested as well based upon where they reached last year. And they also have a defense that even without Hamilton and Brett Pesce is a pretty solid blue, even without those two guys.
Now, before we move on to the Islanders and the Panthers, what about injuries? What happens? How many players can actually fill in for other players? And what are those players doing? And I'm assuming they're practicing with the team since there's no minor leagues going on right now.
Correct. So there's the Black Aces like we always have. So teams were able to bring as many goalies as they want. Teams have brought 3 or 4 goalies. So, for example, the Rangers already had 3. They have Igor Shesterkin and Heinrich Lundqvist, but they also have Alexander Georgiev, who's there. But you're allowed to have 28 skaters, right? So each team has about 8 additional skaters that could end up being part of that roster. For example, Vinny Latteri, who had a good year in the minors for the Rangers, is there. Vitaly Kravtsov, who got some earlier this year, is there. The one story that's also is a key here is Brendan Lemieux, because of his hit against Jonas Donskoy in the last game right before the pandemic hit, is suspended for the first 2 games of the playoffs of the play-in round.
Okay. All right. Islanders 50-1, Panthers 50-1, and the Islanders are a 7 seed. The Panthers are a 10 seed. Taking a look at these two teams, again, there's not a whole lot separating them as far as the seeding, as far as the odds. So does that mean that this is as even a series as it says? Because the Islanders seem to be a little bit more, I don't know, talented. They've got the coaching. They've got a little bit more experience in the postseason recently. So shouldn't the Islanders be the favorite to win the series?
So I think there was 1 point between the two of them, if I remember correctly, maybe 2. On paper, you look at Matthew Barzal, who had a good year, and he's setting himself up for a big payday as a when his ELC expires. Brock Nelson had a big season. You look at guys like Anders Lee, who had an okay, not a great year, but the Islanders as a whole didn't score a lot. You look at the Florida, and you have guys who are somewhat game breakers. Jonathan Huberdeau had a big season. Alexander Barkov, who potentially is usually a Selke Trophy candidate, had a big year. Mike Hoffman had 29 goals as a future UFA. Evgeny Dadonov had 25 goals as a UFA. So stylistically, Florida's a much more offensive-minded team than the Islanders are. But the Islanders have the edge in terms of their playing style because of, you look at what Semyon Varlamov did between the pipes this year. Thomas Greiss backs him up. They just signed Ilya Sorokin, who's supposed to be their goalie of the future. Florida doled out 7 years and $70 million to Sergei Bobrovsky, but he had an absolutely horrific year, and he was actually replaced by Chris Dridger towards the end of the year. I mean, Florida on the blue line has really good power play guys, and Keith Yandel and Aaron Ekblad. Beyond that, then you go to guys like Mike Matheson, so it's a drop-off. The Islanders, they're one of those teams that the sum of the parts is greater than the individual whole in their blue line. So Ryan Pulak had a pretty solid, not a spectacular year. I mean, they were going to be without Adam Pelech because of his Achilles injury when the pandemic hit, but now they get him back. I mean, you look at guys like Nick Leddy, you look at Johnny Boychuk. Those are guys who have experience, but who weren't playing particularly well. So on paper, you could literally say it's kind of a toss-up between the two, the Islanders having the edge in goal. But if Bobrovsky turns back the clock and plays like he did for Columbus last year when they upset Tampa Bay, that's a team that could do a little bit of damage in the playoffs, but we didn't see a whole heck of a lot from Bobrovsky when the season ended.
All right, let's step it up here. We only have a few more to go before we wrap up. Tampa Bay and Columbus 70-1 against 18-1. Yet it's an 8 versus a 9. So what's the deal with that? Because Columbus, they had all those injuries, yet the players are coming back. And I mean, this is, I don't know. I mean, I'm a little bit surprised at the, and again, I'm not saying the series price, but it makes it seem like this is a major edge to Toronto when, I don't know, I'm not so sure that's the case.
So look, I mean, John Tortorella did a tremendous job this year. I mean, you look at all the injuries, as you mentioned, that team had, right? And this is a reason why he's a Jack Adams, because somehow he found a way through spit and bailing wire to get that team to be into the playoffs to begin with. Toronto ended up getting rid of Mike Babcock and put Sheldon Keefe in as their coach.
Rookie coach, like in a situation like this. So,
yep. So, but yeah, so on paper, Toronto's got names like Matthews and Tavares and Marner and Nylander. Defensively, though, Tyson Barrie didn't have a great year. Jake Muzzin is probably their best defensive defenseman. And Frederik Andersen, look, I mean, the jury's still out given what happened last season. Columbus, as you said, injuries, right? Pierre-Luc Dubois had a good year. Oliver Bjorkstrand had an okay year. He missed time. Cam Atkinson, disappointing year, missed a ton of time. Seth Jones missed time. Zach Werenski missed time. Both goalies, Merzlikins and Korpisalo, missed time, right? So Tortorella's got to decide who's their number one. So on paper, you would say, yeah, it's Toronto. But Tortorella kind of evens the playing field a little bit, and that's probably why the odds are what they are, because Toronto's been a disappointment in the past, and Columbus found a way to get past the number one overall seed in Tampa Bay last season.
All right, Edmonton, Chicago, and even though Edmonton's a 5 and Chicago's a 12, Chicago's 25 to win the cup, and Edmonton's 22 to 1 to win the cup. Corey Crawford, he's a big part of this series, isn't he? If Chicago's going to have any chance.
They're going to have any chance, it's going to be Crawford. Now, Crawford just returned to practice after missing almost all of phase 3 with COVID. He's literally, as he kind of used his, not his terms, but to kind of use a term that makes sense, he's still getting his sea legs, right? He doesn't have his conditioning. He doesn't have his cardiovascular. He didn't really face any shots. He's going to get thrown into the fire pretty immediately. And if he doesn't swim, Malcolm Subban and Colin Dealey are not the two guys that are going to be the guys that can carry it. I mean, Chicago's got, Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane. They've got Brandon Saad. They got the Brincat, who had a disappointment year. Dominic Kubala came out of nowhere to get 30 goals and be a Calder Trophy candidate. But you look at that team overall and compare it to Edmonton, and you got McDavid and Draisaitl, and Draisaitl was similar to Panarin, was a Hart Trophy and Ted Lindsay Award finalist. They've got Yamamoto and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. They brought in speed in Andres Athanasiou and Tyler Ennis. You got Zach Kassian, who gives them some physicality. Their blue line has Clefbaum and Nurse, but there's a drop off after that. In net, you don't know who's going to be the goalie between Mike Smith or Mikko Koskinen. If Crawford doesn't play, I think Chicago's got no shot. If Crawford does play, and if he's Crawford like we've seen in years past, that little tinge of doubt starts to come into Edmonton's mind, especially if they lose game 1. But on paper, Edmonton should win this series.
Okay, also in the West, Nashville 45 to 1, Phoenix 55 to 1. Nashville's a 6 seed. The Coyotes are an 11 seed, and Nashville did start to play better as the season wore on. Looked like they were going to if they kept playing the way they were, it looked like they were going to have a good chance to make the playoffs in that within that 8 seed in the West. But it's all about Pekka Rinne too, because Pekka Rinne has just had an up and down season, and Darcy Kemper might have the advantage over him.
So in my view, if Kemper hadn't gotten hurt this year, he quite possibly might have been a Vezina Trophy finalist. I mean, Rinne's not had a good year. Saros has replaced him at times. I don't know if Saros will be the number one. I think they may go to Rinne. Nashville's also one of those teams you talked about, no fans and no home ice advantage. Nashville's one of those squads that feed off their home crowd and get a major advantage, right? So in net, I give the substantive edge to Arizona. I mean, up front, Nashville hasn't had a great year offensively. Ryan Johansson wasn't particularly great. They defensively, with Roman Josi and Matthias Ekholm, they have an advantage over Arizona defensively, though Oliver Ekman-Larsson kind of helps narrow the gap a little bit. To me, if Clayton Keller has a good series, and we know they got Phil Kessel, if they can get those guys to have good series, I do think that Arizona's got a really good shot at advancing, especially if Kemper plays like he did earlier in the season before he got hurt.
Vancouver 7 seed, Minnesota 10 seed, but Vancouver's 33 to 1 to win the cup. Minnesota 66 to 1. So you would think Vancouver has the edge here. Big bonus as far as Vancouver with Jacob Markstrom coming back. Had no idea what his status was going to be before the pandemic, but now Vancouver gets him back. And if the question is how does he pick things up? Probably take him a little bit. But then again, I think that's going to be the case for most of the other players as well. But if Jacob Markstrom plays the way that he did before his injury, Vancouver could surprise a team or two in the tournament.
Absolutely. I mean, Thatcher Demko did a nice job stepping in for Markstrom, but Markstrom's a clear number one and setting himself up for a big payday as a UFA. I mean, Minnesota started to really pick up the game when Alex Stalock ended up going in. Devin Dubnyk dealt with a family issue. He struggled before he was sidelined, but Stalock really righted the ship for them and kind of helped carry them to get into the playoffs. I mean, Vancouver, is better than I do as a Vancouver fan. I mean, they made steps this year to kind of take a run, right? They got Tyler Toffoli. You put him on the Pearson. You have Besser, who's been rumored to potentially be on the block after the season ends because of some cap concerns. Bo Horvat, JT Miller they imported, giving up a first rounder who's been everything that you could have wanted and more. We know how good Elias Pellion is. Minnesota they stole basically Kevin Fiala from Nashville, ended up being a flat out robbery. He's been their best offensive player. Eric Staal's had another good season. Jordan Greenway gives them a big body up front. We know what Zach Parise is, but though Parise could be playing his last series in Minnesota because he almost ended up in New Jersey at the deadline when talks broke down. I mean, Quinn Hughes, phenomenal. but Detroit is kicking themselves, at least to a certain extent, taking Phillips over Hughes, the number 6 pick. But the problem is after the blue line, except maybe Alex Edler, is nothing special, though Tyler Mize has been okay. Minnesota has Suter and Spurgeon and Matt Dumba, who took a step back. So defensively, I may give a slight edge to Minnesota. But if Markstrom is Markstrom of earlier this year, and you look at what Vancouver has offensively, you'd expect that they should be able to get Minnesota into the regular playoffs.
All right, and finally, the 60-1 Winnipeg, 50-1 Calgary, 8 versus 9. Good matchup here. The big edge, though, for Winnipeg is their goalie situation with Connor Hellebuyck.
Hellebuyck was a Vezina Trophy candidate. He at times might have been a Hart Trophy candidate at one point in time. You look at, Dustin Byfuglien was gone. They got rid of Trouba. They got Neil Pionk, who had a phenomenal season. But the rest of their blue line, you had no-name guys to a certain extent, other than maybe Josh Morrissey manning the blue line. But Hellebuyck was just phenomenal. David Rittich and Cam Talbot don't necessarily match, and Talbot took Edmonton to the Cup Finals a couple of years ago, but he's regressed, and Rittich is nothing special. I mean, up front, you look at all the names that Winnipeg has: Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler, Nikolai Ehlers, Patrick Laine. They brought in Cody Eakin as a second-line center. Carolina, Calgary's top line of Johnny Gaudreau, Sean Monahan, Elias Lindholm, all had seasons where their numbers compared to last year fell off substantively, but they were able to make up because Matthew Chuck had a very good season. Their blue line, Mark Giordano, won the award last year. Unfortunately, this year, last year's Norris Trophy winner, he took a major step back, and the rest of the blue line's been nondescript. Winnipeg, on paper, thanks to the depth offensively and Helly between the pipes, should be able to get past Winnipeg. It's possible the Flames steal the series, but only if Helly struggles a bit. But if Helly is Helly, I don't see this going more than 4 games.
All right, let's make quick predictions then. We'll start from the East. Okay, I'm taking Pittsburgh.
Same.
I'm taking Carolina.
I'm going Rangers.
I'm taking Islanders.
I'm going Islanders too.
I'm taking Columbus.
I'm going to take Columbus as well.
I'm taking Edmonton.
Same.
Nashville.
I'm taking Arizona.
Vancouver.
I'm taking Vancouver.
Winnipeg. Okay, so the only games we disagreed on, teams or series, Carolina, Rangers, and Nashville, Arizona. Okay, so if it goes 5, when does the second round begin? Or the first round of the playoffs, when does that begin?
About 2 weeks.
They don't have a date yet?
I don't have it in front of me. I mean, I can go up.
Is it a Saturday?
Probably. It'll probably be a Saturday or Sunday is my guess, yes.
Okay. Well, we'll be on next week. So we'll talk next week. We'll get an opportunity to probably late in the week. So this will give us an opportunity to see how each series has gone for 2 or 3 games and get an idea of everything else going on with how it's taking place. No home ice advantage either for Toronto or Edmonton, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can really call it a home. I mean, yes, there will be home teams, quote unquote, but I don't think you can call it.
Yeah, no edge, no reason except that they know the ice. That's it.
Correct.
Okay. All right, Jan.
I mean, again, you can argue Toronto and Edmonton have a slight home ice advantage, but yeah. I don't know if you're going to really call it a home ice advantage because of the fact that there's no fans there, right?
Sure.
Teams are playing in those rinks also, so I don't know if I would really call it a home ice advantage right now.
Okay, sounds good. And rotowire.com, what are you going to be doing between now and next week?
In terms of RotoWire, probably not a lot, at least initially. I mean, my predictions for each series is up on the website because it's done series by series, and a couple of us weighed in terms of our view. But in terms of moving forward, my Rangers, I've posted a analysis of the defense, analysis of the special teams, and analysis of the defense. I'm going to be proposing my